Thanks. How we doing? Awesome. All right, I'm going to bring us home. We'll start with a little bit of recap from the past week. This is day 4. Brandon kicked us off. We'll talk a little bit about Notre Dame Studios and some new things. There are not a lot of new media services that were announced. There are a lot of things that are under the hood that we'll ultimately be able to leverage through partners that we work with on different things. And we'll talk about something that's really exciting, this ND streaming service that some of you probably heard a little bit about. So Brandon kicked us off some highlights last Friday, I guess it was. We talked a little bit about VDI. There are applications in VDI for things like edit stations. We're kind of resource constrained here by space. What would it look like if we needed to spin up 20 more edit stations here for our router group or our FIM group, that kind of thing. So VDI may play a role in that. Dan Horst, thank you. A little discussion about DevOps. So enlighten us on DevOps and also shared the wet blanket news as well. Thank you, Dan. And security, Amy, thank you for covering some of the security stuff. Really interesting. The Access Analyzer, and James, thanks for touching on that as well. That's pretty interesting stuff. AI machine learning, Tony's not here, but a lot going on in the AI machine learning space. SageMaker and other, the suite continues to grow there. And then John talking about Outpost and Nitro. I've yet to watch the James Hamilton video, but that looks interesting. And then James, thanks for the governance discussion, and then we'll jump into media and OTT. So, Notre Dame Studios, are you all familiar with what we do here? Kind of, sort of? Are you familiar? So I'll give a brief overview. AVT, so this is Jason Railton's group. This is the AV technology in classrooms, learning spaces on campus. Looking at some enterprise AV plans there, broadcast engineering. This is Scott Reinhardt's team. These are the folks that run all of these events every year. Live streaming, my team, Eric, Richard, Jeff Miller, including some Zoom services. Lynn Langston for production management, which Notre Dame Studios handles about 1,700 events this past year. Wow. Yeah, just a little. About 350 of those are live streaming events. We actually have one running right now over in the Fortune. Thanks. And teaching and learning technology. So this is Paul Turner's area. Paul Turner and Brian Burchett. As part of the OIT reorg this past summer, they joined Notre Dame Studios. Gives us a little more focus on working with the academy, Mission University. So that's really exciting. Few things kind of working there right now. There is a migration of the Nexus LMS from what the group formerly known as ODL, now Notre Dame Learning. So that's migrating from Nexus to Canvas. So that's really exciting, and that may give us light into what Sakai might look like down the road as well. Also a support project to make sure that our services and our offerings are aligned quite closely with ND Learning's goals. And some other efforts happening around teaching and learning technologies. There's a lot happening there. Hale has been working on some things around global classroom. So I always like to, when we talk about Notre Dame Studios, we're about, I'm going to find, where's Michelle? She left. So we're about 85% of our services are cloud-based, Amazon, SaaS-based or something. We're 90% of the last 15. So this facility went up in 2017. So as we shut down one data center, yes, we have 1-2 walls over, but constantly looking at ways that we can, as we look at new investments in capital plans and MUR, looking at what might play a role for us cloud-wise. Extremely low latency production workloads. That's kind of the theme of this talk. There have been a lot of things that Amazon's done recently to get further and further into the edge, and we'll explore some of that. So first and foremost,
so the Rex announced
something called Global Classroom.
Opened in August of 2017. And it's the realization of the vision that Father John had. He was working with athletics back in 2012.
Here's an example. We did a pilot this past summer on something called the Global Classroom. We're doing a full installation of this.
And from their
some upcoming summer classes for Notre Dame
Learning. Scale this for teaching and faith.
The global classroom is a
using
huge
Zoom
improvement
technology
over
and a whole bunch of AV and
my
other
office.
equipment in the teaching
So
studio,
from my
which is 2 walls
office,
over,
I'm constrained
to enable
sitting in
synchronous
my space,
teaching and
looking
learning
at my
or summer
relatively
classes
small
and beyond.
computer monitor. Here I have the chance to see the gallery of students on the large monitor, which makes it much more like a live classroom. Also means I can move around, which makes it more like a live classroom as well.
So the global classroom has been a very helpful tool to me as I've been teaching this class. I've tried teaching remotely before, and I think the difference the global classroom makes is it allows direct interaction with students. I can see them all on the screen at the same time, and we're face to face with each other instead of just trying to do talking over PowerPoint style of teaching.
The Microsoft Surface, it's been amazing to work on. I really hope I can get one of these for my classroom because it's such a pleasure to be able to draw diagrams and erase things and students can see it clearly. I've never seen to say, in a real classroom, my handwriting is terrible, and they can never see anything. But with this, because it's full screen, clear colors, it's a lot better than drawing on a whiteboard actually.
So one of the things I do when I teach on campus is have the students work together in groups on coding assignments. And what the global classroom has allowed me to do is have that same type of experience online. We use the breakout rooms in Zoom, and we're able to randomly assign students to small groups where I give them a problem. They go to the breakout room and solve the problem together as a team, and then we come back to the classroom and work on the solution together.
I think that using Zoom for the global classroom was easier than the online class because we had a whole team that was preparing everything beforehand. And so if there was technical difficulties, they were fixed right away and the professor didn't have to mess with any of that. And we just had to show up to class and everything was set up for us.
So I think it's not some new things, it's just that the technology is better in the global classroom. So us is largely numeric problem solving. In the global classroom, I have the ability to open a document that describes the problem, annotate that as we walk through the problem so the students can really know what to look for as they're reading a problem and trying to solve it. And then with a click of the clicker, I can get a blank screen on the surface and write out the solution to the problem. So it's just technologically a much cleaner approach to doing the same kinds of things that I would mimic in my office with a document camera.
I think if other professors have opportunity to teach an online course, I think this would definitely be a great environment for them, particularly if they want to really interact with their students, if they want to have great support from ODL and OIT. I think all that infrastructure is really great and has made my experience very straightforward. I have no complaints.
So, yeah, so as TLT merged and came into Notre Dame Studios, we've constantly been looking at ways and how we can link into the academy and work on some more academic projects involving media. For the AWS Media Services announcements, we'll typically see these fall, and this is kind of every year trend-wise, they fall into improving quality, workflow improvements, some standard stuff mixed in there usually, latency. That is our enemy in the media workflow business. And some monetization that may or may not impact us going forward. I'd say one of the big wins of reInvent this year was actually Dan Skenzel attended for his first time. So Dan was able to see firsthand the number of media and entertainment companies that are actually leveraging the cloud to enable their own workflows. So this is, BBC, Nat Geo, Major League Baseball, Fox, the list goes on, CBS, Discovery, HBO, all sorts of organizations leveraging cloud services. This is just a quick.
During reInvent,
I'm keeping an eye on the clock, so we have to flip this for one.
Several great pioneering media customers. We got two of them actually that are going to join me later on stage here. That actually have been innovating and building next generation media workloads in an AWS type environment. We heard from Turner that is doing some great work in terms of editing cloud, all on AWS. We also have been hearing from Untold Studios. They're actually one of the first to actually run the visual effects studios in an AWS infrastructure environment. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame also is moving.
So as we take a look at what our peers are doing in this space, either the big media companies or someone like Rock Hall of Fame, asset management in the cloud, and then leveraging all sorts of AWS tools, recognition for metadata and tagging and those sorts of things. as we live in
We're
an
hearing from
on-prem
Fox, they are doing some
asset
fantastic
world,
work.
these
They're
are the kind of
actually
things
building
we
out
should be looking at
their
further down the road.
transformative 8K capable media platform on AWS. Fox will actually be using AWS Media Services to deliver its linear broadcast workflows. And I'm sorry, a couple more.
So the AWS Media Services, the core of their services fall into these buckets here. I won't go into each one of these, but there's some interesting things going on around Media Connect. So Media Connect is call it a disruptor in the space to address, in the past, the use of fiber optic connections to deliver broadcast video around the world. This is now able to be done through an AWS console environment. And we'll go into some of the changes and new announcements here too on media services. There are related media services as well as what are called the Elemental Suite or the Elemental family of tools. So Media Live, some new stuff there. Again, this is around latency, reducing bandwidth costs, moving towards HEVC for new encoding schemes for Media Live. So this is something that we'll probably be testing down the road. Single pipeline channels. In the past, so our current workflows for live streaming leverage almost every platform we use is freely available. So YouTube, Facebook, Periscope. The only one that we're paying for is Vimeo. But so as we take a look at our own live streaming workflows, there are certain cost environments here that are preventing us from moving full in on Media Live. StatMux in the cloud. This is an interesting one that Fox came out with, a live demo at reInvent. So StatMuxing is essentially taking, so in the case of Fox, large broadcaster, they're taking multiple channels and they're muxing those channels into basically a single connection, typically over satellite, to deliver that out to, say, a Comcast, so they can then distribute that on their cable networks. So the StatMuxing that is being done now within Media Live is allowing for this adjustable bit rate depending upon the scene. So it's actually doing analysis against the encoder framework to take a look at actually what, so a talking head is less bandwidth than, say, a hockey game or IndyCar racing or something. So it's actually doing some adjustment on the fly and allowing to bring all that bandwidth cost down to transmit some of that over. Now, yes, this is for big broadcasters, but there are technologies in here that we'll see down the road impact our own operations. Media Store, this is really kind of an interesting one. It's chunk transfer. So Media Store is a specialized low latency storage service. The chunk transfer application now allows you to, through like a live environment, whether it's OTT or whether it's live streaming, to be able to be feeding that origin server. And as you're feeding the origin server, you can actually be streaming out of it. So depending upon the segment size for the video, so that's going to actually lower the latency. We do live streaming out to some of our CDNs. The latency is generally anywhere between 25 to 45 seconds. Media Convert, there's some accelerated transcoding. Here's one where we might not necessarily use that ourselves, but a partner like Panopto that hosts in AWS for our lecture capture, that's something that we'd likely see from that agreement. 8K transcoding through Media Convert. Again, file sizes get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. We are not in an 8K environment here. It's going to be probably a few years before we get there, but it's good to know these kind of things could be supported. Some other things around high dynamic range with Dolby Vision and some improvements around Dolby Atmos for immersive audio as well. So this is Media Connect. So this is where they're competing with satellite broadcast fiber. We had a project recently where we were paying LTN to deliver Catholic TV. So Catholic TV is a channel out primarily on the East Coast of the United States. Every Sunday we deliver Mass from the Basilica to Catholic TV. There was a cost involved there to pay for that fiber optic cable and that connection. We're not using Media Connect, but we're using some other technologies around encoders using an open source called OpenSRT. So RIST down here and Zixi are some competing technologies in this space to deliver broadcast quality video over public internet and lossy networks. Interesting thing around RIST is there are similar technologies and protocols under the hood with RISC. They're also being used for VDI delivery. It's all about how do you deliver over lossy networks and lowering latency. We're going to skip that. So related services. So there's that core of Elemental Family Media Services, that Elemental suite. But outside of that, there are a number of services that are also used for media delivery or the media market in general. Things like Amazon Recognition for machine learning, Amazon Transcribe, Amazon Translate, Kinesis video streams, more of a kind of a security camera approach there to pull in streams of video. But the big theme here that we're seeing, I think, this year is a push out to the edge. And not this edge, but it's outposts. John talked about yesterday. Whether we get in that space or not, and if and when S3 storage comes to outposts, that outpost may serve as a bridge for us. But at least the current configurations of outposts sounds like it's probably beyond what we're interested in doing. But that form factor may change. But again, it's a push into the edge to get closer to that end customer and reduce latency.
Now, solve for this issue.
Local zones, and
I
it's
have
going to
certain
scream at us.
workloads that need to live in my on-premises data
So
center.
the local zone
Can't
stuff is
move
really
to the cloud.
interesting.
But there's a
From a
second
media
barrier that
perspective.
we're hearing from a number of customers. It's particularly larger organizations who say, I have end users in a particular geography that have workloads that are latency sensitive, where they need single-digit millisecond latency, and where I don't have a data center, or I do have some kind of colo or clunky GPUs under my desk, and I don't want to manage anymore. What can you do about that? And that's a very interesting issue as well if you're a cloud provider like us, because it's very expensive to launch these mega regions like we have in 200 or 300 cities around the world. We have a lot more coming, but I don't know if we've really contemplated 200 or 300 more. And so we thought about this issue, and we thought about, can we actually provide a solution? Take the typical examples. These are real examples. If you're a media company in LA where you do content creation or you do video games, those workloads, as they're building them, need single-digit millisecond latency. Or take a company in New York or Switzerland or in financial services, they have to be close to market data. They need those single-digit millisecond latency. And so we thought about, is there a different type of construct we can provide you that solves this issue at scale? And I'm excited to announce a brand new type of AWS infrastructure deployment called local zones, which is a new type of infrastructure deployment that places compute storage and database services close to large cities, starting with our LA local zone available today by invitation.
So where local zones may or may not impact us down the road, it's the trend towards lower and lower latency and enabling customers that have low latency workflows like media houses to be able to leverage some of that. Other related things, these are actually announcements last year, 2018, that will impact us when we look at campus-wide storage. There was a recent project, an assessment project for campus storage, about 10 petabytes all in of campus storage. Media storage makes up about 3 petabytes of that. I think that's what the numbers were. Our own asset management needs, we're looking to leverage Deep Archive to reduce our storage costs and the storage costs of our partners. But there are some integration pieces that need to happen there, correct? Yeah, with Black Pearl Spectra. And then ultimately, if we move to a cloud-based asset management, tiered intelligent tiering, and what's going on there is really interesting. It can impact us in the future. So what is live broadcast in the future? What's it look like? We sit in this environment here in the Martin Media Center. Give you an idea, the same technology that drives this media center drives ESPN, drives NBC, drives Fox. Same technologies under the hood. But as we watch those other providers move into cloud-based workflows, again, it's all around, how can they do this and still maintain low latency levels, latency-sensitive applications. So, talked about outposts, local zone kind of plays in that space as well when you look at the latencies down here. Down the road, this is something that Dan and I have had some conversations around, is what does PCR is the production control room. So what does a studio in the cloud look like? Right, so at some point, these are all feeds that we're pulling in from various locations. Do we need a physical location to actually do these productions? Might be a few years out, but it's something to think about. Wavelength zone was also announced. If anyone saw this at reInvent. So so Verizon came out, so 5G networks. So this is essentially embedding AWS infrastructure within telcos. So Verizon CEO came out and talked about wavelength zones actually landing and being embedded within the Verizon 5G network. Again, to reduce latency for things like gaming, things like video delivery, to obviously pass on those kind of services to customers. Again, it's all around latency, especially in media. So I'll switch gears, and this is gonna be fast. So about a year ago, we kind of brought forward this like big idea of what would it look like for Notre Dame to have its own Netflix, or Hulu, or Disney Plus, which wasn't launched back then. But so a streaming service, also known as over the top. So these are the kind of things you have at home, right, with your Hulu account or your Netflix. Why this? Why now? Democratization of the cloud, right? 2 years ago, the Elemental Service Suite was launched. So 2 to 3 years ago, this really wasn't possible. Now the tools exist. These are available in cloud formation scripts to be able to actually spin this up. We have our asset management house in order. Yes, it's all on-prem, but we've spent about 2 years getting that asset management house together. We have this brand new media facility, and again, cloud now is at a point with media that makes a lot of things possible. Last summer, we did what I call an early stage POC out on Roku, actually back-ended by Vimeo to deliver the content. This is through some conversations both on campus and then with some of our other peers in higher ed, Syracuse, NC State, to just see what this would look like and get some momentum behind it. So it's really it comes down to content aggregation. Right now, a lot of our content, because whether it's athletics, some of that is sold off through partnerships with ESPN, ACC networks, NBC. There is a whole host of content that we're producing here that is owned by our partners, right? Grotto Network or university departments. But right now, we don't have a clear content aggregation strategy. But having something in place that is one spot where it's lean back, easy discoverability, gets us in a position where we could kind of change the game with how we're delivering content with Notre Dame, both live and on demand. So while we were at reInvent, we had a number of meetings with some of our AWS partners, Elemental partners as well. We met with a company called Insys. Insys is a Polish OTT as a service company. And this is something we're going to be starting this POC very soon. We have a meeting next week with Christoph as he's in town. So due to some limited resources, we're gonna try to scale this back just a little bit, but we are gonna try to start this POC, just get more campus partners interested in this. To this point, we've had several meetings on campus with alumni, development, athletics, the list goes on. But to this point, people have been very receptive to the idea. Again, content aggregation to get all into one spot for delivery. That's it. That was quick. Sorry. Questions?
It comes up from across the room. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, the Overtop thing is really exciting. We have such a powerful brand and a deep library of video content and academic space that supports it. I think it's going to be not too difficult to get really excited about it once you show them.
Yeah, the key there is the business model, right? We're not going to do any kind of, at least now, thinking about any kind of subscription model, right? We're not here to compete with Disney or Hulu or Netflix, but it's could be donor funded, could be any sort of contribution to actually get this funded and stood up. Development's very interested in this idea.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
Yeah, so we're actually working, part of this, we're working on the business case as well, right now, to get some ideas behind what this would really look like to support as well.
So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you to the presenters. Thanks everyone for joining us and having lunch with us. If you've got any thoughts or feedback on how this went, how we can improve for next time, please let me know, or any of the presenters. We'd love to hear from you. But just thank you. Grab a sandwich on your way out.
Great job, architects. Enjoy your coordination.